Welcome to the second video in our short series about lessons learned from the book Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning, published by the Belknap Press of Harvard University and used here with permission. We hope you began by listening to the first video in this series. In short, you learned there that learning is an acquired skill. It's deeper and more durable when it's effortful. We're poor judges of when we're learning well. What appears fruitful learning right away may not be learning that holds up over time. And if you're good at the process of learning, you have an advantage not only in your academic life, but in your entire life. So let's dig down into what people see as effective in studying. There are some common approaches: reading the material multiple times, taking notes or highlighting while reading, marathon studying the day before a test so it's fresh in your mind. Well, I'm here to tell you that those things alone are not truly effective for longer-term learning. We'll start with what nearly everyone does, reading the material multiple times. To begin with, we can mistake understanding for learning, not the same thing at all. For example, you could understand the steps your father gave you for changing a tire when he gave you the lecture on your responsibilities as a new driver, but when you got a flat, you had a call to ask what to do. Reading and rereading material feels like it's productive because you understand and can remember in the very short term. The problem is that forgetting begins shortly thereafter. Studies show if you don't follow up your reading by testing yourself, by retrieving the information, you will have lost most of what you quote unquote learned within days. If you go back to our example, imagine going out to the car after the lecture and actually walking through the steps. You would have been much better prepared to handle that flat on your own. The equivalent academic example is, of course, presented in the book. Two groups of college students studied a prose passage. The first group took a recall test immediately after their first exposure to the material. Alternatively, the second group was allowed to reread the material. The results were clear. The group who tested, rather than simply restudying, recalled more of the material. In one experiment, the study-only group forgot a whopping 52% of the material after 1 week, as opposed to the repeated testing group, who only forgot 10%. Retrieval of information interrupts the process of forgetting. You may say, but I'm not just reading, I'm really concentrating on the material and highlighting important information as I go, and I'm taking good notes. I love that. Good for you. That's the right attitude. But you need to take your efforts 1 or 2 more steps to interrupt the process of forgetting. As you think about what you're reading, practice engaging with it. Elaborate on the details, put the material in various contexts, and take your notes in such a way that you'll be able to use them to quiz yourself later, not just reread. Elaboration will help establish more touch points to your memory. Testing or explaining the material to another person will pull the information from memory so it will really stick. Practicing retrieval of information leads to more durable learning. Oh, the temptation of putting off work, knowing that you can pull an all-nighter if you have to. While I admit that this can have a place if you're pushed to the wall to finish a paper or put the final razzmatazz on your project, it's a terrible idea for studying. Your working memory doesn't work well when sleep deprived. It will serve you much better in the long term if you manage your time to allow for spaced practice of the material over days or weeks. Each time you return to it, stop and recollect what you know from your previous exposure. This results in far more effective and durable learning. The bottom line on how to incorporate retrieval into your study routine. When studying, don't just read the surface of the topic. Stop and think about it as you go. Engage with it. While you're studying, think of how you'll later test yourself. Practice explaining what you've learned to someone else, and imaginary friends will suffice. When using note cards, put a prompt on the front and an explanation on the back to facilitate quizzing yourself rather than simply rereading the flashcards. Do things like review the lecture that you just heard in your mind as you walk to your next class. Remember how when you were a kid, your parents would ask, "What did you learn in school today?" And you might roll your eyes. Well, it turns out that if you thought about that answer and recalled details, the question was actually helpful after all. I hope you'll join us for the third video in our series on improving the efficacy of your studying, where we tackle a better approach to practice problems. Spoiler alert, practice alone doesn't make perfect.